My name is Beatrice. I am 67 years old, and for 40 of those years, I raised my son to know the difference between right and wrong. I failed. It was a cold, gray morning last October when he finally suggested our hike a promise he had made and broken a dozen times. I felt a fragile hope as I packed a simple lunch, thinking this was his way back to me. I was wrong. Before I tell you what happened in those woods, I would be so grateful to know where you are listening from today. If my story connects with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means more than you know. Now let me begin. That morning, the air in my mountain cabin held the quiet chill of a season turning. I pulled on my old wool sweater, the blue one my husband Arthur had given me decades ago, its cuffs slightly frayed. The act of lacing up my sturdy boots felt familiar and comforting. Outside the kitchen window, the North Cascades were a muted tapestry of deep green fir and the fading gold of tamarack. I placed an apple and a turkey sandwich into my small day pack, along with a bottle of water and an extra pair of socks. It was just a short hike, he had said. A chance to see the last of the fall color in a meadow he remembered from his boyhood. When his SUV crunched up the gravel drive, the sight of it so sleek and out of place here sent the first faint tremor through my calm. Gregory stepped out looking more like a magazine ad than my son. His jacket was expensive technical fabric in a stark black, and his shoes were clean city shoes. He gave me a quick, tight hug that didn't reach his eyes. "Ready for an adventure, Mom?" he asked, his voice too bright. "Always," I said, trying to match his tone. "I have been looking forward to this." The drive started in silence, broken only by the hum of the heater. We passed the familiar turnoff for the popular lakeside trail, and my eyebrows lifted in surprise. He kept going, turning onto an old logging road I hadn't been on in 20 years. The road was brutal, a scar of mud and jagged rock. His car bottomed out with a sickening scrape, and he swore under his breath. "Gregory, are you sure this is the way the meadow was off the main trail?" I said. My hand braced against the dashboard. "This is a better spot, more secluded. You will love the view, I promise," he said, his eyes fixed ahead. He then cleared his throat. "So I was talking to Tara last night. We were going over some financial planning. That parcel of old growth next to the cabin, it is worth a fortune now. Developers are circling." A coldness that had nothing to do with the weather crept into my bones. "That land is not for sale, Gregory. You know that. Arthur wanted it left wild. It is in my name and it will stay that way. It is just not practical, Mom. You are sitting on a gold mine while living in a drafty cabin. What if something happens to you, the taxes alone?" His voice was smooth, rehearsed. I laughed, a short, nervous sound. "Well, I am not planning on happening anytime soon. And when I am gone, it is all yours to do with as you please, but not before." He did not respond. The road got worse. The trees closed in thick and dark. After another 10 minutes of jarring, silent travel, he pulled into a small, bleak clearing where the road simply ended. He turned off the engine. The sudden quiet was absolute and heavy. "Well," he said, unbuckling his seatbelt, "we are here." I peered out the windshield. There was no meadow, no view, just dense ancient forest and a wall of salal and devil's club. "Where is the trailhead?" "This is it." He got out, walked around, and opened my door. The gesture was chillingly formal. "Come on, let's get some fresh air." Puzzled, I stepped out, the cold immediately seeping through my jacket. I turned to reach for my day pack on the back seat, but he was faster. He grabbed it, his movements abrupt, and tossed it back into the car. It landed on the leather seat with a soft thud. "Gregory, my pack?" He looked at me then, and for the first time I saw it. A complete absence. No love, no irritation, no feeling at all. It was the flat, empty look of a stranger. "You always said you loved these woods so much," he said, his voice conversational, almost pleasant. "You wanted to be close to Dad. Well, now you can be. Permanently." He tilted his head, a cruel parody of thoughtfulness. "Think of it as meeting a grizzly bear. A quick end. Better than a nursing home, right?" The words did not make sense at first. They were just sounds, ugly sounds in the cold air. Then they slammed into me, a physical blow to the chest. I actually stumbled back a step. "What are you— This is not funny. Stop it." He did not stop. He got back into the driver's seat, pulled the door closed. I heard the definitive thunk of the locks engaging. I stood there frozen as he started the engine. He adjusted the rearview mirror, his eyes meeting mine in the glass for one last second. Then he put the car in reverse, backed up, turned around and drove away. I watched the red taillights bob and disappear into the tunnel of trees. The sound of the engine faded, swallowed by the immense silence. Then it was gone. I was alone. 67 years old in jeans and a sweater with a tube of lip balm and a pocket knife in a wilderness I did not recognize. The wind picked up moaning through the high branches. It was starting to rain. The silence after he left was not quiet. It was a roaring in my ears, a deafening void where my world had just been. I stood in that muddy clearing for what felt like an hour, maybe two, my mind a white blank of shock. The cold became a conscious thing, fingering its way through my sweater, settling in my joints. A light icy rain began to fall, a mist that beaded on my hair and lashes. "Move, Beatrice, you have to move," Arthur's voice clear as if he were standing beside me. It broke the paralysis. My first instinct was to run after the car, but that was madness. The road was long, and I was not dressed for a miles-long trek. My second instinct was to sit down and weep, but that was a death sentence. I patted my pockets with numb fingers, taking inventory like he taught me. My old buck knife, its wooden handle worn smooth. A single crumpled tissue. My house keys. A tube of cherry-flavored lip balm. No phone, no water, no food. The contents of my day pack, the sandwich, the water, the extra layer, a lightweight rain poncho, a small first aid kit, were gone locked in my son's car. The reality of it, the meticulous cruelty, hit me in a fresh wave. He had not just driven off in a fit of anger. He had watched me pack that bag. He had let me bring it to the car. And then he had taken it from me. This was not an impulse. This was a plan. A raw, guttural sound ripped from my throat. Part sob, part scream of fury. It echoed faintly in the clearing and was absorbed by the forest. The anger was good. It burned through the shock, melting the ice in my veins. I would not die here. I would not give him the satisfaction. I looked around, forcing my brain to work. The clearing was exposed and would only get colder as night fell. I needed shelter. At the edge of the tree line, a giant western red cedar had fallen long ago, its root mass creating a tangled, earthy wall. Beneath it, where the roots had torn from the ground, was a shallow depression sheltered from the wind and rain. Working with stiff, cold fingers, I used my knife to cut branches from nearby Douglas firs, the ones close to the trunk that were drier. I piled them into the root cavity, creating a rough mattress. I cut more, weaving them into a makeshift windbreak at the opening. It was crude, but it was something. As I worked, a memory surfaced, vivid and painful. Gregory could not have been more than 10. Arthur had us both out in these very woods teaching us survival basics. "See this?" Arthur said, pointing to a pale, stringy lichen hanging from a branch. "Old man's beard. Not for eating, but perfect tinder. Even when it is wet, the inside is dry." He showed us how to gather the driest, finest shreds from the center. Gregory had been bored kicking at rocks. I had been fascinated storing every piece of knowledge away like a squirrel with nuts. The memory of Arthur's patient voice, his rough hands demonstrating, was a physical ache. How had that boy become the man who left me here? By the time my shelter was as good as I could make it, the light was leaching from the sky, turning the world a deep, damp blue. I crawled into the space, pulling fir boughs over my legs. It smelled of damp earth and pungent evergreen. The night was a long, slow agony of cold and fear. Every sound was a predator. The rustle of a mouse in the leaves became a cougar stalking. The hoot of an owl was a portent of doom. I shivered uncontrollably, my teeth chattering. I thought of my warm bed in the cabin. I thought of Gregory and his wife Tara, probably enjoying a glass of wine in my living room, speculating on how long it would take. The rage returned, a low, sustaining burn in my gut. When the first weak gray light filtered through the trees, I was stiff, aching, and fiercely alive. My mind was crystal clear. I used the knife to score a deep mark on the cedar trunk, an arrow pointing the way he had driven. Then I oriented myself. The road had come from the south. The mountains rose to the east. Somewhere to the west was the Skycomish River. If I could find moving water, I could follow it downstream. Civilization of some sort was always near a river. My body protested as I pushed myself up. Every joint creaked. My empty stomach clenched, but I had a direction. I took one last look at the miserable little hollow that had kept me alive for the night, and I started walking. The forest was not a park. It was a vertical, tangled, demanding entity. There were no trails. The undergrowth was a snarled web of vine maple and fallen logs cloaked in slick, spongy moss. My progress was measured in feet, not miles. Thirst became a sharp, nagging companion within the first hour. My mouth felt full of cotton. I listened hard, and beneath the chorus of wind and bird call, I heard the faint musical trickle of water. I followed the sound to a moss-covered rock face where water seeped out in a steady, clear film. I knelt, cupped my hands, and drank. It was so cold it made my teeth ache, and it tasted of stone and earth, the best thing I had ever tasted. I drank until my stomach felt full and sloshy. Food was a different problem. My knowledge was theoretical, rusted with disuse. I recognized the shriveled red rose hips on a bare bush and gathered a handful. They were tart, seedy, and fibrous, but they had calories. Further on, I found a patch of evergreen huckleberries, the last of the season, wrinkled and frost-sweetened. I stripped the tiny berries carefully, savoring each one. It was not a meal, but it was fuel. As I picked my way down a steep, leaf-littered slope, my mind, freed from the immediate panic of the first night, began to sift through the past year. The clues had been there, painted in bright colors I had refused to see. Gregory's visits had become less about me and more about the property. He and Tara would walk the boundaries, heads together, talking in low tones. Tara, with her sleek blonde hair and sharp, assessing eyes, had always treated the cabin like a quaint, slightly embarrassing relic. "You are so brave to live out here all alone, Beatrice," she would say, and it never sounded like a compliment. Then came the pressure. "Mom, we could set you up in a lovely condo in town. Security, amenities, people your own age." When I refused, the tone shifted. "It is irresponsible to let this asset sit here. The timber alone. We are talking about life-changing money." The arguments grew more frequent, more heated. He had asked me just a month ago to sign a new power of attorney document. "Just in case you have a fallout here, so I can handle things quickly." I had refused that too. I told him Martin, my lawyer and old friend, had all the necessary documents. Now, as I pushed through a particularly thick stand of young hemlocks, my jacket caught on something. I turned, expecting a branch. It was a strip of bright pink plastic flagging tape tied taut around a slender tree trunk. It was new, not faded by the sun. My breath hitched. I took a step back and looked around. There was another about 20 feet away, marking a straight line through the forest. Then another. This was not Forest Service tape for trail marking or research. This was the kind used by surveyors and timber cruisers to mark property boundaries or harvest lines. A sickening understanding washed over me, colder than the river water. Gregory had not driven me to a random remote spot. He had driven me to a specific location on my land, a location someone had already been out here to flag. The abandonment was not just an act of malicious neglect. It was a step in a process. Remove the obstacle, me and the valuable timber would be unencumbered. My disappearance while on a solitary hike would be a tragic accident, a story he and Tara would sell with tears in their eyes. He was not just leaving his mother to die. He was clearing a legal and financial path. The grief that surged up then was monstrous, a black tide that threatened to pull me under. I leaned against a tree, gasping for air that would not come. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, it felt like my own bones were turning against me. I slid down the rough bark to the forest floor, the dampness seeping through my jeans. I wrapped my arms around my knees and let the tears come, silent, heaving sobs that shook my frame. I cried for the baby I had rocked, the boy I had taught to fish, the man who had become a venomous stranger. But as the storm of tears passed, leaving me hollowed out and raw, something else remained. That cold, hard core of resolve had only solidified. It was no longer just about getting home. It was about stopping him. I wiped my face with my damp sleeve, the rough wool scratching my skin. I used my knife to carefully cut one of the pink flagging tapes from the tree, stuffing it deep into my pocket, evidence. I stood up, my legs trembling but steady. The emotional earthquake had passed, and the landscape of my heart was forever altered. As I turned to continue my westward trek, a sudden furious buzzing erupted at my feet. I had stepped on a ground nest of yellow jackets hidden under the leaves. Pain, white-hot and electric, stabbed into my ankle and then my neck. I cried out, swatting wildly, stumbling backward. I ran clumsy and panicked for about 50 feet before the buzzing faded. The pain was intense, a throbbing, burning pulse. My ankle began to swell inside my boot. The sting on my neck felt like a brand. I remembered an old remedy. I found a patch of bare, muddy earth near a seep, mixed it with a little water from my cupped hands, and plastered the cool, gritty mud onto the stings. The relief was minimal, but the act of treating myself of doing something kept the fear at bay. The incident was a brutal reminder the forest was indifferent. My son had thrown me to the wolves, but the wolves were only one of the dangers here. I had to be smarter than all of them. The sound of the river grew from a whisper to a steady, powerful rush, a sound of life and movement that pulled me forward like a magnet. By the time I pushed through a final wall of alder and saw it a wide slate-gray torrent flecked with white foam, my body was screaming. My ankle throbbed with every step, the hornet sting a hot coal of pain. The huckleberries and rose hips were a distant memory in my grinding stomach. The river meant hope, but its banks were a new challenge, steep, eroded, and treacherous, with slick water, polished stone. I picked my way downstream, clinging to branches and roots for support. The rain had started again, a cold, persistent drizzle that soaked through my sweater and made everything slippery. I was so focused on my footing on the next handhold that I did not see the patch of unstable gravel until it was too late. The ground beneath my left foot simply gave way. I fell with a choked cry, sliding down the bank in a shower of dirt and small rocks. I plunged into the river up to my thigh. The cold was so shocking it stole my breath. It felt like 1,000 needles driving into my flesh. I scrambled frantically, clawing at the muddy bank, my boots slipping on the submerged stones. Panic, pure and mindless, rose in my throat. Hypothermia. If I did not get dry and warm, this would kill me faster than any hunger. Somehow I hauled myself out, dripping and gasping. My left leg was numb from the knee down, my jeans soaked and heavy. I was shivering violently now. Great racking shudders I could not control. I had to get a fire going. Now. I stumbled away from the river's edge into a slightly drier stand of trees. My fingers were so cold they were clumsy, almost useless. I used my knife to strip away the wet outer bark from a dead standing cedar, exposing the dry, fibrous inner wood. I shredded it into a nest. I gathered the driest twigs I could find, the dead ones still attached to trees, snapping them off. I needed a spark. Arthur had taught me with a flint and steel, but I had neither. I did have my knife and a piece of quartz I had picked up earlier, thinking its sharp edge might be useful. I struck the quartz against the steel of my knife blade, aiming the sparks into my nest of tinder. Again. Again. A tiny wisp of smoke appeared, then died. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly aim. I took a deep, ragged breath, forced my body to still for a moment, and tried again. A spark caught a glowing orange pinprick in the cedar fiber. I bent down and blew on it gently, like coaxing a baby bird to life. The glow spread. A tiny flame flickered, licked at a twig, and caught. Tears of relief mixed with the rain on my face as I carefully fed the fire, building it from a fragile hope to a small, steady blaze. I was just starting to feel the first precious waves of heat when I heard it. An engine. It was a rough, sputtering sound, utterly out of place. I looked up across the river. On the opposite bank, an old Forest Service road I had not even seen wound through the trees. And bouncing along it was a pickup truck from another century, its paint a faded primer gray, its bed piled with firewood and tools. I stumbled to my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. Friend or foe? In my state, I had no choice. I waved my arms, my soaked sweater a dark flag. "Hello, help over here." The truck slowed, then stopped. The driver's side door opened and a man stepped out. He was older than me, maybe late 70s, dressed in worn canvas pants and a red and black checked jacket. He had a thick white beard and sharp eyes under the brim of a stained baseball cap. He stared at me across the 50-foot width of the rushing river. "You lost," he called out, his voice a gravelly baritone that carried over the water. "My son left me out here," I shouted back, the words raw. "2 days ago, I need to get to the road." He stared a moment longer, then nodded once, a sharp, decisive motion. He got back in his truck, turned it around, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was leaving. Instead, he drove 100 yards downstream to a place where the river braided around gravel bars, making it shallower. He gunned the engine and drove the old truck right through the rushing water, sending up great plumes of spray, and emerged on my side. He pulled up near my struggling fire and cut the engine. He did not get out immediately, just looked at me through the open window, assessing. "You are Beatrice," he stated, not asked. "From the cabin up on the ridge, the one with the big cedar shake roof." I was too stunned to ask how he knew. I just nodded, my teeth chattering. "Get in," he said, unlocking the passenger door. "You are about to shake yourself apart." The inside of the truck smelled of oil, wood smoke, and coffee. He reached behind the seat, pulled out an old wool horse blanket that smelled of dust and animals, and handed it to me. "Wrap up." As the heater blasted lukewarm air and the rough blanket began to trap my body heat, the violent shivers slowly subsided. The man put the truck in gear and began navigating back across the river. "I am Jasper," he said, his eyes on the water ahead. "Live about 5 miles up this road, year-round. Not many of us fools left." He glanced at me. "Your boy. He the one in the fancy black car. You have seen him. Saw him up here maybe 3-4 times in the last month. Had a skinny blonde woman with him once. They were walking the line looking at trees. Had a map." Jasper's mouth tightened. "Asked me once about a month back if I knew who owned the parcel west of the old Miller place. I told him I minded my own business. Didn't like his attitude." The pieces of Gregory's plan snapped together with an almost audible click. The reconnaissance, the surveying, it was all premeditated, stretching back weeks. "He drove me out here and left me," I said, my voice hollow. "He took my pack. He told me to meet a grizzly bear." Jasper was silent for a long moment, the only sound the tires on the wet road. "I believe it," he said, finally, the words heavy. "Saw the pink flagging they put up. That is timber cruiser tape, marking a boundary for a cut." He looked at me, his eyes like flint. "They were planning to log it. Your land." The confirmation should have devastated me. Instead, it filled me with a clarity so sharp it was almost painful. The grief was still there, a vast, cold ocean, but I was now standing on a solid rock in the middle of it. I knew what he had done. I knew why. And I knew with every fiber of my being that I would not let him succeed. "Jasper," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "I need to get home, but I cannot let him see me. Not yet." A slow, grim smile touched the corners of Jasper's mouth. "I know a back way. Comes out near the old quarry behind your place. He will never see you coming." Jasper was a man of few words, but profound competence. He drove me through a labyrinth of forgotten logging spurs and overgrown tracks, a network known only to the few old-timers who remained. He did not offer platitudes or sympathy. He offered practical help. As we neared the turnoff that would lead to the back of my property, he fished in his glove box and pulled out a battered matchbook from a diner in a town 2 counties over. He scribbled a number on the inside flap with a stub of pencil. "That is my line," he said, pressing it into my hand. "No cell service up at my place, but the landline works. You need a witness who ain't from around here who saw your boy and that woman prowling around you. Call that number. I will answer." I took it, the cheap paper, feeling like a priceless artifact. "Thank you, Jasper. I do not know how to repay you. Just don't let the bastard win," he grunted. "Now you get out here. Follow that deer trail through the alders. It will bring you up behind your woodshed. You will be home in 10 minutes, and he will be none the wiser." I climbed out, the blanket still wrapped around my shoulders. The rain had stopped, and the late afternoon light was a pale, watery gold. I watched his taillights disappear back into the forest, then turned and started up the faint path. I moved with a hunter's caution, the stealth Arthur had taught me for approaching deer. Every step was deliberate quiet. The familiar sounds and smells of my own land, the particular sigh of the wind through the tall pines near the property line, the scent of damp bracken fern wrapped around me, both a comfort and a source of fresh pain. This was my sanctuary, and he had defiled it. I crested the small rise behind my cabin as dusk was settling in, painting the sky in shades of lavender and charcoal. My home. The sight of it, with its warm golden light glowing in the windows, should have filled me with relief. Instead, it made my stomach twist. His car was in the drive. Lights were on in my living room. Smoke curled from my chimney. I moved like a shadow down the slope, keeping to the tree line until I was crouched beneath the big living room window. It was cracked open an inch probably to let out the stuffiness from the fire. Their voices drifted out clear and unconcerned. "The official search will probably be called off after a week," Tara was saying, her voice cool and analytical. "It is a vast wilderness. These things happen to elderly people who wander off, especially if they are confused." A glass clinked. "The sheriff seemed to buy it," Gregory said. His voice was relaxed, almost cheerful. "The concerned son routine works every time." I laid it on thick about her early signs of dementia, how she was always talking about wanting to be with Dad. "I still think we should have pushed harder for the power of attorney," Tara replied, a hint of annoyance in her tone. "What does it matter now? Once they find the body, or more likely don't, the probate process is a formality. We are the only heirs. That timber contract is ready to sign. We will be breaking ground by spring." There was a pause. Then Gregory laughed. It was a sound that froze the blood in my veins, light, carefree, and utterly cruel. She wanted to be with Dad. Now she is. "To new beginnings," Tara said. I heard the distinct sound of glasses touching. A toast. They were in my house drinking my brandy, toasting my death, and planning the destruction of the land I loved. A white-hot fury purer and more intense than any I had ever felt blazed through me. It burned away the last remnants of grief, the last fragile hope that this was some terrible misunderstanding. This was the cold, hard truth. My son and his wife were monsters. But I did not throw open the door. I did not scream. The fury condensed into something else, a diamond, hard, icy calm. Confronting them now in my weakened emotional state would be a mistake. It would give them the upper hand. They would spin it, call me confused, hysterical. They might even try something more desperate. No, I needed to be smarter. I needed leverage. I needed to strike from a position of strength, not from the shadows. I backed away from the window, silent as the falling night, and melted back into the trees. I did not go to the cabin. I went to my writing shed. The writing shed was my secret haven. A small, sturdy building Arthur and I had built together 30 years ago, nestled in a copse of vine maples about 300 yards from the main cabin. It had a proper foundation insulation, a wood stove, and solar-powered lights. I used it for painting, for writing letters for solitude. To Gregory, it was just Mom's dusty old craft shack. He never went in there. I had a key hidden inside a hollow knot in an old stump 5 paces from the door. My hands were steady as I retrieved it and let myself in. The familiar smell, pine paneling, old paper, and the faint scent of turpentine was a balm. I locked the door behind me. First light. I found the solar lantern and switched it on, casting a soft, warm glow. Next heat. The wood box was full. In minutes I had a small, bright fire crackling in the stove. The warmth began to seep into my bones, driving out the deep chill that had taken up residence. I stripped off my wet, filthy clothes and changed into the spare set I kept there, soft, worn sweatpants and a thick flannel shirt. The simple act of being clean and dry in my own space was profoundly empowering. Now the tools. I went to the old battered filing cabinet in the corner. In the bottom drawer behind folders of old sketches and recipe clippings was a fireproof lockbox. Inside were the instruments of my counterattack. My last will and testament, updated just 6 months ago after a mild health scare. Gregory knew I had a will, but he had never seen this one. In it I left the cabin and a small cash sum to him. But the crown jewel, the 20-acre parcel of old-growth timber, and the accompanying financial trust for its perpetual stewardship, I had left to the Northwest Land Trust. Martin had helped me draft it. I had wanted to ensure the trees Arthur loved would never be cut, no matter what Gregory decided to do with the cabin. I had meant to tell Gregory about it, but his increasing hostility made me hold my tongue. Now it was my shield, the property deed proving sole ownership in my name. The pink flagging tape from the forest now dried and crumpled in my pocket, and Jasper's matchbook with his phone number. I had the evidence. I had the legal standing. Now I needed the execution. I powered up my old laptop, which lived on the shed's desk. The satellite internet connection was slow but reliable. My fingers flew over the keys with a purpose they had not had in years. First, an email to Martin, my lawyer. I kept it factual, unemotional. Martin, I am safe. Gregory deliberately abandoned me in the wilderness north of the property with the intent to kill me or cause my death. His goal is to gain control of the timberland. He has been surveying it. I have evidence and a witness. I need you to do 3 things immediately. 1. File a report with the sheriff detailing this as an attempted crime stating I am alive and a victim. 2. Draft a cease and desist letter to Gregory and Tara, barring them from any dealings with my property. 3. Execute the new power of attorney revoking any previous versions and naming you as my sole agent. I am at the writing shed. Do not call the landline. Use this email. Beatrice. I hit send. The message whooshed away into the digital night. It felt like launching a missile. Next, I logged into my bank's website. Gregory was listed as a signatory on one joint checking account I used for household expenses, a convenience from years ago. With a few clicks, I removed his access and transferred the bulk of the funds to an account he knew nothing about. I changed the passwords on everything. Then I called Jasper. The phone rang 5 times before he answered his yellow gruff. Jasper, it is Beatrice. I need that witness. Told you I would answer. What do you need? Can you come into town tomorrow morning and meet with my lawyer Martin Bryce and give a statement about seeing Gregory and the woman surveying my land, and about picking me up? I can be there by 9. Thank you. I will have Martin call you to confirm. I paused. You are saving my life, Jasper. You are saving your own, ma'am, he replied, and the line went dead. Finally, I made one more call to a locksmith in the nearest town, scheduling a first-thing morning appointment to change all the locks on the cabin. By the time I was done, the fire had burned down to coals. I ate a can of soup from the shed's emergency pantry heated on the stove. The simple meal tasted like victory. I lay down on the small cot wrapped in a wool blanket and listened to the sounds of my forest through the thin walls. For the first time in 2 nights, I felt safe. I was home. And tomorrow, I would take it back. I woke with the dawn, a clear, cold light filtering through the single window of the shed. I felt a calmness so deep it was like being immersed in still water. The frantic fear, the consuming rage, the paralyzing grief, they were all still part of me, but they were locked away in separate chambers of my heart. What guided me now was a clear, unwavering purpose. I made a pot of strong coffee on the camp stove, the rich smell filling the small space. I dressed carefully in clean, comfortable clothes, dark trousers, a simple sweater, my hair brushed and tied back. I looked like myself. I felt like a new version of myself forged in the cold of the forest and the fire of betrayal. At 8 o'clock precisely, I left the shed. I did not skulk. I walked with a straight back down the familiar path to the main cabin, the frost crunching under my boots. The morning was breathtakingly beautiful, the air sharp and clean. I used my new key, the one the locksmith had quietly delivered to the shed at 6 that morning, and let myself in through the kitchen door. The house was quiet, but I could hear the murmur of voices and the clink of dishes from the dining room. They were having breakfast. My breakfast on my china. I stood in the doorway and watched them for a moment. Gregory was scrolling on his phone, a piece of toast in his hand. Tara was sipping coffee, studying a spreadsheet printed on paper. Good morning, I said, my voice level and calm. Sleep well. The reaction was everything I had imagined, and more. Gregory's head snapped up. His eyes went wide, the color draining from his face so completely, he looked like a wax figure. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the table. Tara froze the coffee cup halfway to her lips. Her sharp eyes widened in genuine, unvarnished terror. For a long second, there was only the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Mom! Gregory finally gasped the word, exploding from him. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. You're alive. Thank God we've been out of our minds with worry. He started around the table toward me, his arms outstretched, his face attempting to contort into an expression of relief. I took a single step back, holding up my hand, palm out. The gesture was a wall. He stopped cold. Save it, Gregory. I said, my voice still quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. I heard you last night, toasting to my death, planning the timber contract. His mask of concern shattered, replaced first by confusion, then by a defensive anger. What are you talking about? You must have hit your head out there. You're confused. We've been searching for you. I called the sheriff. I know you did. To report the poor, confused old woman who wandered off. I walked slowly to the head of the table where my chair usually sat. I did not sit down. I placed my hands on the back of it. You drove me to a clearing at the end of the Grizzly Creek Spur Road. You took my day pack from the car and threw it back in. You told me to think of it as meeting a grizzly bear. Then you drove away. His mouth opened and closed. He looked at Tara, who had set her cup down with a precise click, her face a cold blank mask. That's insane. Why would I do that, Mom? You're not well. I am perfectly well. Better than I have been in years, in fact. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled length of pink plastic flagging tape. I laid it on the table next to his abandoned phone. I found this, tied to the trees, surveyor's tape, marking the boundary for a timber cut. My timber. He stared at the tape as if it were a snake. Jasper saw you. I continued, my tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. The old man who lives up on the ridge. He saw you and Tara up there multiple times last month with maps. He saw the tape go up. And he is sitting in Martin Bryce's office right now, giving a formal statement about finding me half-frozen and abandoned by the river yesterday. Now Tara spoke, her voice icy. This is slander. You have no proof of anything. You are a distraught elderly woman who got lost and is now fabricating a wild story to punish your son for not watching you more closely. I almost admired her cold nerve. Almost. I ignored her, keeping my eyes on Gregory. I have already spoken to Martin. He has filed a report with the sheriff detailing the attempted crime. He has drafted a cease and desist barring you from any transaction involving my property. My new power of attorney naming Martin is being executed as we speak. Your access to my accounts has been revoked. I let that sink in, watching the fury and panic war in his eyes. The locks have been changed. You can't do this, Gregory shouted, the anger winning out. He slammed his fist on the table, making the china jump. I am your son. This is my inheritance. You were my son, I said, and the finality in my voice silenced him. Now you are a stranger who committed a monstrous act. You are no longer welcome in my life or on my land. You have nothing, he spat. It's your word against ours. No one will believe you. I finally reached into the large pocket of my sweater and pulled out the folded documents Martin's assistant had hand-delivered to the shed at 7 that morning. I smoothed them on the table. The new will, the sheriff's case number, a copy of the cease and desist. This is no longer a family matter, Gregory. It is a legal one. You will leave my property now. Your personal belongings will be boxed and left at the end of the driveway by this afternoon. If you ever step foot on my land again, or attempt to contact me, the sheriff will deliver the full file, including Jasper's statement and the evidence of the premeditated surveying, to the district attorney. I believe the charges could range from criminal endangerment and fraud to attempted murder. I am sure Tara's real estate license board would be fascinated as well. The fight went out of him then. It was a physical deflation, his shoulders slumping, his bluster dissolving into a whimper. He looked from the documents to my face, and I saw it, the realization that he had lost. That his mother, the old woman he thought he could discard, had outmaneuvered him completely. Mom, please, he whispered, a last pathetic attempt. Leave, I said the single word, leaving no room for argument. They went then, silently gathering only their coats and purses from the hall. They did not look at me as they walked out the front door. I stood at the window and watched Gregory's sleek black SUV roll slowly down the gravel drive around the bend and out of sight. The silence it left behind was deep, and for the first time in a long time, it was peaceful. It was my silence. The weeks and months that followed were not a victory march. They were a slow, often painful reconstruction. After the adrenaline of the confrontation faded, a profound emptiness settled in. The cabin felt too big, too quiet. The grief for my son, not the man he became, but the boy he was, the man I had hoped he would be, was a ghost that walked the halls. Some days it sat heavy on my chest, and I could do nothing but sit by the fire and let the tears fall. I did not magically heal. I simply put one foot in front of the other. My friends in town, the few true ones, circled around me with quiet, steadfast support. They did not ask for details, just brought casseroles and sat with me in comfortable silence. Martin handled all the legal unpleasantness. A civil suit for fraud and emotional distress was filed. Gregory and Tara, through their lawyer, settled quickly and quietly. The terms were sealed, but they included a formal legal relinquishment of any claim to the timberland. They moved out of state. I heard no more from them. Jasper became an unexpected anchor. He would show up every other week or so, always with a practical excuse, a bag of venison, a spare part for my generator, a warning about a storm coming. We would share a cup of coffee on the porch, talking little, but his gruff, solid presence was a reminder that not all human connections were betrayals. The land became my primary therapy. I walked my property lines every day, not with fear, but with ownership. I watched the seasons change over the old growth parcel, the one now permanently protected. I would stand among those ancient giants, some over 500 years old, and place my hand on their mossy bark. They had witnessed everything. They had stood through storms and fire and time. My small human drama was a blink to them. There was a profound humility and a deep comfort in that. One afternoon in early spring, I was in the writing shed. I had taken down the few pictures of Gregory that were in there, a graduation photo, a childhood drawing. I sanded the wall smooth and painted it a soft, warm yellow. It was not an act of erasure, but of reclamation. I was making space for something new, even if I did not yet know what that was. The lesson I learned was not about vengeance, though I had secured a form of it. It was not even about forgiveness, for I could not find it in my heart to forgive what he had done. The lesson was about gravity. Love is not a guarantee. It is a force like gravity that can hold worlds together. But when that gravity vanishes, when the center fails to hold you, do not float away into nothingness. You discover your own mass. You find that you have a substance, a weight, a core of self that exists independently of anyone else's orbit. I had defined myself for so long as Arthur's wife, then as Gregory's mother. Stripped of those titles by death and betrayal, I had to ask, who is Beatrice? She is the woman who survived the cold. She is the woman who read the map of her own heart and followed it home. She is the woman who tends her garden, who befriends gruff old loggers, who sits in silence with her grief until it becomes a companion, not a master. The wilderness did not teach me how to survive my son. It reminded me I already knew how. The coldest thing I faced was not the forest floor. It was the calculated human heart. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful action you can take is to remove a toxic presence from your life. With the same decisive finality, you would cut a diseased limb from a tree. It does not make the tree less of a tree. It allows it to grow healthy again. Now I sit on my porch as the sun sets the river a silver ribbon in the valley below. The woods are no longer a place of threat, but of solace. They held me when my own flesh and blood would not. And in that, there is a terrible, beautiful peace. I wonder, what is the anchor in your life? Is it a person, a place, a purpose? And if that anchor were cut, what would you discover is the unshakable core of who you are? If this story of betrayal, survival, and finding a strength you never knew you had resonated with you, I would be honored if you shared your own thoughts in the comments below. Tell me, what did this bring up for you? If you found a measure of peace or strength in my journey, please hit the like button. It lets me know these shared stories matter. Consider subscribing for more conversations about healing, resilience, and the quiet victories of everyday life. And if you know someone who might need to hear that it is possible to walk out of a personal wilderness, please share this with them. Thank you for listening truly. From my quiet porch to wherever you are, I wish you peace and the unshakable knowledge of your own worth.